Hey guys, first regardsman here. Today I'll be talking about Chaos Spawn in Space Marine 2, whether or not these enemies are unfair. And to talk about this with me, I have brought on Jefficus. What is up, Jeff? What do you think of Chaos Spawn in Space Marine 2?
I personally love Chaos Spawn. I think that the way that their attack patterns are balanced with their indicators is very reminiscent of something that I would want to see in like a Souls game, where they tell you exactly how to deal with the attack. You need to dodge this upcoming attack, or you can parry it, but the attack doesn't come immediately afterwards. You have to look at the enemy and see when the animation is telling you that the attack is actually going to land. So there's the indicator, a bit of a pause, and then the attack comes. I think it's great. I think it's cool.
I think that Chaos Spawn definitely made Chaos easier to fight overall. However, I did put out a community poll a while back asking people if they thought that Chaos Spawn were unfair in Space Marine 2. 33,000 people voted in that, and they were pretty split. It was 60% in favor of them being unfair, and 40% said no, they are not. So I can kind of understand where people are coming from. They think the Chaos Spawn are unfair. I think that parry mechanics are very difficult for a lot of players in any game. And Chaos Spawn, I think they are blatantly more unforgiving than the Tyranid Warriors are. And like you said, the indicators, they do have a delay and stuff like that, and that is harder for a lot of players. Some of them may
Yeah.
lack more indicators than others. But while I personally don't think they are unfair at all, I can see where players who get stun locked and knocked around by these guys, because let's be real. Chaos Spawn are pretty mean on the stun lock. If you mess up an input, if you don't
Yep.
parry them, if you don't perfect block them, if you not use your block charges properly, you will get knocked around. And stun lock's been an issue in Space Marine 2 since like launch. They've gotten a little bit better. No knockback perks are pretty strong and more prevalent on all classes now than they were like a year ago. But still, Chaos Spawn, they are unforgiving, and an unforgiving enemy like this is going to feel really bad to new players. And even though I enjoy them personally, I can see where the players who are having this hugely difficult time parrying them are coming from. Now, as far as if they should be nerfed or not, there will be a lot of new players coming into Space Marine 2 during Tech Marine, and they're about to hit the wall of chaos, as I would put it. So I'm curious what you think about that.
I do think that it would be a good idea to nerf them strictly on the basis that the enemy doesn't follow the same pattern that any of the other enemies exhibit. For example, if you're fighting a Tyranid warrior, as soon as you see that blue indicator, okay, I've got to hit the button now. Like I need to do it right now. It's got to happen. And same with almost everything else in the game. They're pretty much the only enemy other than the Zangor Enlightened where there's a bit of a delay between the indicator and the actual attack landing or coming for you. So I think that either the indicator should get adjusted, or if the indicator is not going to get adjusted, then maybe they've got to tune the numbers down just a little bit, or maybe they reduce or not reduce, but increase the cooldown between those attacks that more commonly kill people, which I assume would probably be like the thrash attacks, right? Like the berserk attacks, where if you don't parry it on time, you just kind of get stun locked to
Yeah, the
death. If you don't
tentacles
have,
too.
yeah, and like the tentacles, like if you don't have a perk to resist the stun effect, then you're just gonna get destroyed. But I think it should be nerfed because yeah, we're gonna get a ton of new players coming in for Tech Marine and returning players as well, and they're gonna be like, what is this enemy? Like, whoa, chaos is different now. Oh, they're pretty cool. And then they're gonna get mobbed by like 10 of them, and they're gonna be like, that was the most unfair thing in the game I've ever faced.
I think that's what a
Holy
lot of the
crap.
players who are playing right now, that's what they feel like. And I think the people are going like, oh, this is pure skill issue on their part. Like, technically, yes, it is skill issue if you're getting shit on by Chaos Spawn. But the question is less so like if it's a skill issue, and more so what is the baseline skill required to fight Chaos Spawn in Space Marine 2, which I think it is just higher than the other faction enemies. I think in Light and Zangors, they do have that delayed hit, like you said before, but as far as indicators are concerned, Chaos Spawn do lack a lot of indicators for their attacks, so you have to know the moveset of the enemy beyond like a beacon telling you when they're going to attack, which a lot of players be like, oh, that's great, like that gives you a higher skill cap for the game, which is true, but like at a
Right,
certain
right, right.
point, I do think you want to like take into account where the player base's overall skill level is at, especially with newer players that are coming in, because the fundamental problems with Chaos Spawn that people have, I feel these are present on all difficulties. The only real question is whether or not your fuck up will instantaneously kill kill you like it can on hard stratagems, or just get knocked around and like have control ripped from you. And that feels pretty bad for a lot of players. I think people don't like fighting like heavy CC enemies in any game because crowd control effects, it feels pretty bad to just lose control of your character, which is why stun locks have been such a controversial topic in the game since launch. Now, as far as what they could do to fix this, I think indicators would be a better middle ground than like actively nerfing them. Maybe lower the spawns of them for lower difficulties, because I don't want to take away the enjoyment from like, the players that really want to put in the work and like really take their gameplay up and practice and practice and practice versus these enemies. I think that's fun for a lot of people, and you want to make sure the high level players something to do as well, and lower level players don't feel like they're being robbed of all their movement, or they have to like fight something that's like truly obnoxious for them. Now, as far as the player base for Space Marine 2 is concerned, I feel like there is a pretty substantial amount of players that have zero issue with Chaos Spawn, but I think those new players should be taken into account.
Yeah, I think a lot of when it comes to just setting the pattern for a game, a lot of players get into a mindset when they're fighting Tyranid enemies all day, every day. And when they go to fight Chaos enemies, the indicators between like them showing up and the parry or the dodge actually becoming relevant to like a button input or a keyboard input being different from the Tyranids, I think is kind of where the problem is, because the game is teaching you like, hey, this is when you need to hit the button, is when you see the indicator. But then when you fight the Chaos Spawn in Zinger Enlightened, it's not like that at all. I almost say that it would probably benefit the player base for pretty much like all the indicators to be like Chaos Spawns, but in Space Marine 3. You put the training wheels on early, so players are exposed to it as soon as they fire up the game's campaign, or as soon as they start grinding out that game's version of operations, whatever that journey is going to be. That way, players are used to every enemy type having basically what we have right now with the Chaos Spawn. If the design is in the game intrinsically, then everybody's already used to it. The problem here is that everybody is used to fighting, I guess what you would call maybe enemies 1.0, where the enemies are, you see indicator, you hit button. Whereas Chaos Spawn is very much a 2.0 kind of enemy.
They are definitely
People
a more
aren't-
advanced
people aren't
enemy.
prepared for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, people aren't prepared for it.
I feel like indicators are a huge issue in the game in general since launch. So people have had a lot of complaints about this. I think Saber's aware of that. In their defense, they've made a pretty huge effort to like improve sound cues, improve general visual notifications for the indicators of the enemy attacks. In patch 11, we had an entirely different sound cue added to the game for these unblockables and stuff like that, because before players were just confused all the times. If you have the same sound effect for a light attack and an unblockable attack, it's going to be very confusing for players, because human beings, we react to sound before we react to actual visual cues, which is why you have a gunshot at a race before you actually have a visual indicator for when players have to go, because it's just a faster reaction from the human brain. And I think in general, Space Marine 2 has done a pretty good job at fixing this, but there are still attacks in Space Marine 2 that you can parry that players are unaware of, because a lot of any attack in this game does not have an unblockable indicator can be parried, and a lot of players don't know that because Space Marine 2's tutorial doesn't tell them anything regarding this. So a lot of players will try to like dodge out of the way of these attacks, or they'll think like they're unblockable because they didn't get the blue indicator. And I feel like if you add more blue indicators to all of these attacks, that would help people out a lot. I think in the case of Sword Warriors attack slowly enough, doesn't really matter. But in the case of Chaos Spawn, they do kind of look like a giant gray blob in a lot of cases, and having like more glowing indicators to their actual appendages and stuff like that could also probably help. I think they're a pretty well designed enemy in actual function, but as far as indications of what they're doing is concerned, it's that's where the issue actually is for a lot of players, I think.
Yeah, I think it certainly is. And it also is a little bit of a build check. I think that especially when you see these guys in like a hard stratagem or something, right? Like depending on what those stratagems actually are, if you're not bringing a kind of user-friendly build into this chaos specific mission, then you're probably going to get clapped if you're, one of the 90% of the player base who typically has problems with this kind of enemy. If you are someone who's doing, true solo absolute runs, probably not going to be a big deal. But not everybody's at that level, obviously. So it is a little bit of a build check. Probably going to be using some of the better guns in the game, some of the better perks, etc., etc.
Yeah, no knockback perks. Things like the Inferno pistol, their stocks went up dramatically because Stagger is super useful versus them. Because when Chaos
Yeah.
Spawn stack their attacks, that is what can kill like pretty much any player in this game at certain points. Where if they properly frame trap you, which is an issue in Space Marine 2 occasionally, not as big of an issue as some people say it is, but frame traps can happen, and Chaos Spawn are definitely like a big culprit of this. That they will just stack their attacks in a way that if you don't know the perfect movement for these enemies, you will just get cooked, and that doesn't feel very good for like anyone in the player base. So I hope they do take a look at these indicators like we mentioned before.
So I think the last thing I want to throw in there is sometimes it's pretty hard for me visually to see where their head is, specifically because most of the time you're fighting a Chaos Spawn on like a Demirium based operation. And you've got like basically purple on purple, and it's just like, dude, like what am I shooting at here?
That is true. The maps can be a little confusing as well beyond the actual models of the Chaos Spawn, because Chaos Spawn, they do kind of like a purple hue to them a little bit in some of the scenarios. You see this in Vortex a lot. It's just not easy for players to like register what's going on. I feel like they are really good for the high level player base where they have made siege mode easier. They have made chaos easier for classes like
Yeah.
assault. They are definitely a benefit to the faction overall. I really don't agree at all when people say like, oh, Chaos Spawn suck, they should be removed from the game, which is what some people say. Rubric Marines are a more dangerous enemy for a lot of players, and they're also the Chaos Spawn. They do give you more executes, they give you more gun strikes, they also give you more block charges and stuff like that. So there are an overall benefit to the faction, but like I said before, you know, it really depends where the actual player base skill level is at for an enemy like these, because I wouldn't throw a Shadow of the Erdtree boss into Space Marine 2 because it's simply not where the player base
Not at
is
all.
at.
No.
At some point, you do have to take into account where your player base's overall skill is at, and I'm pretty sure Saber does do this to some degree. They actually have the metrics for like what the clear rates of these missions are, but as far as community concerns are concerned, I think they should at least look at this for new players who are coming in, or maybe give a better tutorial to the game's mechanics like this in general. But Jeff, thank you for coming on today, and if you guys have any thoughts on Chaos Spawn, let us know in the comments below. Maybe you agree with us, maybe you disagree with us. Let your opinion be heard, and as always, thank you for watching. Take it easy. Bye.
The Emperor protects.